Man to man, combat hand to hand, hands locked, ready for the last stand, elbow drops, kicks fade bang. If I connect you, levitate, better settle mate, lights out, knocked out by the heavyweight.
Hi, it's Toby from Heavyweight MMA. Lucky today to have Coach Hostile himself, Karl Webber, and Fergus the Future Jenkins on to have a chat. Welcome, guys.
Cheers, bro.
Cheers, man.
Lately, I've had the opportunity to talk to quite a few of the New Zealand current fighters, such as Dan Hooker, Kai Kara France, Shane Young, a few of these boys. But I feel like, it would be not a good thing to just talk to the current fighters, man. It's a good thing to go back, look into our history. And for you guys in New Zealand, Karl Webber has played a big part in the history of MMA, been involved in the early days of MMA fighting, etc. So want to get you on for a chat, man. It's really what this show's about, learning from the past, learning from people that have devoted their life to martial arts. So it's going to be good to have a chat, man.
Yours. Very good.
Now, it was a long time ago that I met you guys. You'll bring over a few of the boys into China. It was actually 12 years ago. You'll bring a few of those fresh-faced young fighters over, such as Dan Hooker, Kai Kara France, Sam Brown, Gareth Ely. Who else was there? Rod McSwain. How is it, man, now that it's been like a decade later and the boys that you supported in the early days are up in the echelon of the sport, man? They're running the UFC, a couple of them now.
Yeah, and it's good to see them all sticking together too, because like Rod and Gareth, they're training, coaching out of Dan's gym, so they still form that tight unit. You know, it's good to see.
That's it, man. Those early days, like when you were training, or you were helping to train a couple of those guys, and a couple of them you were bringing over as well. Did you see in them that these guys would be the type of guys to take it to the top level?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Their work ethic was just there, you know. And then some of them have the natural talent, and then some of them had to work hard for it, but that work ethic was there.
Man, I remember when you brought Kai Kara France over, I think he'd only had like a really late notice fight when he fought in Hong Kong. He fought a guy called Augustin Delamino. And you're telling me that he was a real good talent, up and coming talent, and that he'd taken the fight on about 2 weeks notice. Do you remember that one?
Yep. Yeah. I think he just turned 18. And so I was like, I've got a fight for you. It's over in Hong Kong. And he's like, I have to ask my parents. I'm like, you've just turned 18, mate. You need to make that decision, eh? But yeah, I remember that.
It's funny to see where they've come, like all that way. And I've watched those fights recently because I just, was taking to have a talk with them. So I wanted to just refresh my memory. And
yeah, I go back and watch them. They're good fights. Pat Crawley and even Pang and Jadumba, and those matches, they were awesome. All those matches were good. Yeah,
man, it was actually a good show. And obviously it got the right people into it because, it's got, you guys have gone on to, do really, really well.
Damien Brown, Luke DeMoe. There's been a few to come from there.
That's it. And what struck me the most, actually, to be honest, wasn't just the fighting. It was that you guys were really, really friendly, especially the Kiwis, man. Like there were Aussies there was a few other people there, but the Kiwi group were super friendly, and that was something that stuck with me, and that's why I've kind of kept in touch with you guys. So yeah, that's a tribute to you guys and your background, that you're friendly and approachable. It's a good thing.
Yeah, that doesn't seem the case with the name Coach Hostile, but that's just my coaching style.
Yeah, man. Actually, back then, you were here along with Aaron Boys back then, and I even got the chance to come and actually be in the corner when Kai and that fought and Dan fought, and hold the ice or something. But that was nice just to be able to be there in the corner and then watch your boys grow. It's good.
Yeah, choice, bro. It was good,
man. So I wanted to jump back in the history a little bit, and Fergus, we'll have a chat about you later. We'll just start with Hostile first, man, because we'll talk about the history and then get on to the future later, man.
Sounds great.
So just wanted to go way back. Like I understand the early part of actual competing in that, Karl, but I don't know like how you actually started in the first place. So what drew you to martial arts, and why did you do it? What did you get from it at a young age?
I just like fighting. I was always getting in fights growing up, and I don't know. I needed some discipline, so I guess that was the first thing that drew me in. I was lucky to come across a couple of world jiu-jitsu champions in West Auckland, so they took me under their wing, and the rest is history.
That's it, man. So there was actually jiu-jitsu gyms actually running at that time. That was the early 90s, was it?
Yeah, not Brazilian jiu-jitsu, the traditional Japanese style jiu-jitsu.
That's something that Larry Papadopoulos also kicked off with in the beginning. I guess that's what was available to you guys, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we were onto the Brazilian stuff. We're trying to seek out any little bit of information, but as far as getting a Brazilian coach, that was just a dream back then, you know.
Man, I understand that back then it was just a whole different world, right? I mean, I'm similar age, man. So back then there wasn't internet like it is now. The internet was like kicking off in the 90s, and any sort of research you did was very, very difficult. Now you press a button, you can see 1,000 fights, 1,000 techniques. Back then it was like gold, you know. You could find a video here and there. You could find a book here and there.
Training back then without all the videos to watch, like that's one of my main resources is like the internet and everything. So it must have been a completely different method of learning techniques, and must be hugely different.
Yeah, you know, like we'd have to send away for VHS videos. They come all grainy and they distorted. They were like gold though.
Yeah, and then the books, like the martial arts magazines, and that was another source. But what can a magazine really teach you, right? It's such a you know, limited sort of resource, eh?
Back then, there was our social media there, the Blitz magazine and New Zealand Martial Art magazine. That's how we stayed in touch and let everybody know what we're up to. So I suppose it's been replaced by Facebook and Instagram and that, but that was our, you know, way of getting it out, putting it out there.
That's it, man. So, and also back then there wasn't, it was all broken into pieces as far as looking at a holistic mixed martial arts, right? It was all pieces. It was like
no mixed martial arts. It was just cross training. If you're smart, you cross trained. There's no mixed martial arts. There's no combined gyms. I think Strikeforce was one of the first to do a combined gym.
So you started in the traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. When did you start to venture out to do those other things, such as, you know, stand-up fighting and even more extensive in the ground fighting?
Like I competed like in every jiu-jitsu comp, you know, stand-up and grappling ones and anything I get into. And I think it was just a natural progression. We watched the Gracies in action and the Brazil Vale Tudos, and we just wanted to just test it, you know, to see how it works, to see if it works. So it was just a natural progression. But there was no event, so we had to run our own, like we'd run events and fight on them ourselves.
And what sort of was the main influence back then? Was it like UFC kicked off in the early 90s too? I think it was 93 or something. But before that, there was also those sort of Gracie challenges and Valetudo and that. And then a little bit later on, there was Pride and that. Like, what was the main influence for you guys? What are the main things you watched?
Gracies in action, I think, was the main thing that kicked it off. Just those challenge matches. And then that led to the Valetudo. You know, I think it was called NHB, no holds barred back then, because MMA the phrase hadn't been coined yet. You know, and I think it was just the Gracies. We just we were hungry for that. That was the stuff that was working, it was kicking ass, you know.
And when you started like watching that, did you guys have your own sort of in-house comps and stuff like that before you kicked off the actual events that you had?
No, not really. Not really. We did jiu-jitsu comps, and then we decided we want to have a Valetudo show. So I think there was one cage fight before our first Valetudo show in Auckland. They had it in Dunedin, and then we just started running them out of a boxing ring in Auckland. But we didn't have a clue what we were doing. Which is like we were in over our heads.
Just mixing things together, right? That was so your first show was in 1998, is that correct? It was at the power station in Auckland.
Yeah, the power station, yeah. 97, 98, yeah.
And how did that one go, man? Like how was it perceived by people? How did the actual fights go?
Yeah, a lot of people didn't understand the grappling part. You know, they were just paying for blood, you know. They weren't fight fans. They were just like people drinking at the pub, you know, wanting to see violence. So I think we got a bit of a hard time with the grappling, but you know, that's what worked. So
yeah, man, it's funny, like people have sort of come to appreciate it a bit more, but people still prefer a stand-up fight in general. But people are starting to understand, right? And
people are educated nowadays. They know what they're looking at now. Back then, they were just like, get off of me, you faggot. What are you doing? Get up, you pufter.
Yeah, but it was a funny thing, like in the early days of MMA over in Japan, the people over there are a bit different, right? Like they would just sit back and kind of take it in, and they had a bit more appreciation of the ground fighting, yeah?
Yeah. They had like definitely more like sit back, like you say, like little golf claps. No real crazy cheering and stuff like you see now.
Yeah.
I think fight changed that with like 60,000 people in the events in that day, but the early days, those Japan Valley Tudos, they were pretty cool.
That's it, man. And your early fights, you said there was around 1,000 people on those watching those shows, right? Which was a decent crowd for back then. Like you said, everyone was just trying to witness this new thing, right? Like people had heard of UFC, Ultimate Fighting, and they kind of want to see what it was about. And like you said, baying for a bit of blood.
Yeah. And like it was in the power station was like a nightclub, but people like smoked cigarettes and stuff inside back then. So it was horrible, You wake up in the morning, the next day you felt like you smoked a pack of cigarettes because it's just that thick layer, and it wasn't for an environment for fighters, that's for sure.
Yeah, man. And the interesting thing that you mentioned was in that first one, the main event fight. Was that the one that you said went for 45 minutes?
Oh, that was Chris. That was the first cage fight in Dunedin. Chris Easley for Peter Williamson went for 45 minutes. But it was a square cage, not an octagon, and they got trapped in the corner. So there's, when you're in a 90-degree corner, you can't really shrimp or angle out or do anything. Yeah,
so he's actually on the ground. He was trapped in the corner on the ground when he was getting bashed, or?
Yeah, and Pete was a lot taller than Chris. He just smashed the man for 45 minutes. But Chris is a tough guy. He was a world jiu-jitsu champion. And so, I think he played league in Northern England. So he's a hard man. He just took it,
And in the end, you mentioned he came back and rematched him and beat him in under a minute, was it?
Yeah. They rematched again in Auckland, and Chris just destroyed him. It was a totally different. I think the first one might have woke Chris up to actually what he was meant to be doing. So he went to train with Ken Shamrock over in the US, and when he came back, he was another level.
That's it, man.
He's a good man. He used to single me out when I was coming up and just smash me every night of the week. Just smash me. If I won a title or if I won a competition, then the next Monday he would just smash me and just bring me back down to earth straight away. He's a good coach. That's
it, man. And in 1998, you actually fought in 2000, wasn't it? You won an 8-man tournament.
Yeah.
In a Vale Tudo tournament, right?
Yep.
How did that feel back then for you, man? Was it must have been a tough night at the office? That's quite a few fights.
It wasn't really. I felt like everything I'd done had prepared me for it. And it was like the first big 8-man. I was sure I was going to win it. So, didn't really take any damage. Got a few little lumps, but the jiu-jitsu served me well,
Yeah, how did you win the fights, man? I've seen some highlights of different fights of yours. I'm not sure which ones are that one.
2 arm bars and a triangle choke in the final.
Awesome. Kind of reminds me of your newest champion student there, Fergus, man. Obviously quite grappling based from the tournament that I watched over. Where was that one? Was that in the UK?
Abu Dhabi.
Oh, Abu Dhabi. Okay, cool, man. Yeah. No, I think you've followed on from your mentor a bit there, man. Quite heavy grappling base, right?
Yeah, similar in terms of the grappling, slightly different submissions, I suppose. Most of mine were just basic rear naked chokes, whereas Carl's getting the arm bars and triangles. But yeah, in the grappling sense.
Actually, watching Karl in a couple of those videos, I think I saw a jumping armbar, flying armbar at one point in there. Pretty explosive.
I was trying back then. I was young and fit and skinny, man. It was a lot lighter back then.
Why not, man? Hey, and back then in New Zealand, what was the scene like, man? Was there any like hostility between different groups of people training and that? Did that build up in the fights and that you're having?
We tried to when we were running Supremacy. We tried to like stoke the fire, especially if we were bringing over the Aussies. We brought over Ian Bone to fight Rod McSwain, so we played off the big Kiwi versus Aussie thing.
Yeah,
that's the thing. But really, I think we all get along. all the gyms get along, you know, and they're there for each other at the end of the day. We fight each other, but we've got a lot of respect for each other. Even when we went over there in Macau, we'd always link up with Luke and Ev Ting and all that. So Kiwis would stick together. So not really bad rivalry.
Yeah, man. And when you look at the old days of the fighting that you're involved in versus the new days, what do you see, man, from the people and from the new shows? Like, what are the bad things, man, that you see? What are the good things that you see about the evolution and that?
It's a complete sport now. It's athleticism now. Our goal back then was to get it from the front page into the sport pages. You know, now it's a recognized sport, so it's hugely different.
That's something I kind of reflected on, even though I wasn't part of the sport back then, but looking at it in Abu Dhabi, there's massive, like there's 5 octagons or 4 octagons, all the fights are going simultaneously. It's a big production. And just thinking about what it must have been like back in the day, this is kind of that dream, I guess, that old school dream coming to fruition, looking at how the sport's evolved. And I was even talking to, like, because of Matt Tower and that, like, a lot of the old school guys, I was asking them, like, is this strange to see given where the sport started? And yeah, I mean, that was something cool to reflect on, I guess. Yeah,
man. And obviously, Karl, you and the boys back then were some of the people that have helped to bring that to the mainstream, right? You said you got the show onto Sky TV through a guy called Jacob Toms. That must have been a big step for you guys, right? And also you had to improve your production and everything. So it kind of touches on what Fergus said, that, you know, things have come in leaps and bounds. Like, you had to fix up how you presented on camera, and then you brought it to the mainstream, eh?
We thought we'd cracked it. We went to the meeting with Sky, we got the letter of intent, and we were like, yes, we've cracked it. But it only ever cost us more and more money because the production values went up, you know, and we didn't really recoup anything on the sponsorship or anything, because advertising on TV, that's not worth much these days, you know. We maybe got to trade some stuff for value, but there was no real recoup. But having it on TV and getting it out to the rest of the country, that was worth it.
And do you reckon that contributed to, obviously, a lot of support now from the New Zealand public for the current champions and that? Do you think that started the ball rolling? People starting to be aware of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it gave those guys like Dan and Luke Jamo and Kai that platform. You know, they're going to be on TV. You know, it's like, it's not just in some pub now, you know. So it gave them that foundation that I think helped them with the big game, you know, the UFC, handling the nerves in the UFC.
Yeah, man. And these guys are doing so well and that, and it kind of makes me reflect on the background of you guys, like the Kiwi background. How do you think that that you guys are producing such good fighters from your country, like being a smaller country but still having guys in the top of the world? Where does that come from, man? Like, what sort of parts of the New Zealand culture kind of fit in with fighting and MMA, do you think?
It's 100% New Zealand culture. I think, like the Māori culture, the warrior culture. We learn it from an early age. And we're brought up on the stories, and I think it's just, and because we're such a small country, you know, everyone likes that little mongrel dog that's in the fight that just keeps coming back. You know, that's a big part of it as well. I think we like to be the underdog, the little guys, fighting against the world, you know.
Yeah, man. Speaking of the Maori culture, I saw Fergus returning to the gym, man. That was awesome. The boys did the haka for him, and that really good, man. That sort of stuff's really good to see online, eh?
Yeah, I mean, there was that, and then also as I walked out to the finals, we also got a haka. So I got it as I was coming to the finals, and then when I came back, so it was that was one of the highlights for sure.
That's awesome, man. And how does so the Maori culture, how does that fit in with the gyms and everything, man? Like, is what sort of crossover you have, like from the culture and everything into training and fighting and that?
Like, we just had a big weekend up in the North Island this weekend just gone, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu one, and it was the weekend was held on a marae, so we had a traditional wero, like a challenge was laid down for us before we could come onto the marae, and just seeing that and being you've seen the history, and then the young boy that came out with the taiha and laid down the challenge, like just incredible martial arts skills. You know, guy was only 16 years old, but it was incredible. And just seeing and feeling the culture, like it's just it's in the earth, it's in the air, you know.
And it's a great thing with the guys that are bringing that out to the world as well, right? Like like Shane Young, as I mentioned, like Kai Kara France, like these guys are really like, you know, taking the culture and showing the world your culture. And what it does is not like showing off. What it does is it gives the kids back in New Zealand, and that's something to be proud of as well, right? Like that their culture is represented in the mainstream and with the top dogs in the sport.
Yeah, and it's represented at the highest level too. So it's it's important. It's awesome to see. It's awesome.
True, man. It's quite. It must be proud for you, man, to see these guys up there repping.
Yeah. It's like they're channeling their ancestors. You know, it's like I see it in Kai. He's channeling his ancestors. He's carrying his history with him. It's unreal. It's unreal to see.
That's what he said in that last fight, that, you know, he felt a bit disrespected in that. So he was trying to, you know, channel his culture and, you know, throwing out the Pukana there, try and, you know, challenge him in that face off, man. And look at the result there. Yeah.
Yeah. And because he's the nicest guy, Kai, you know, he's a nice guy. You know, he's not like that savage beast that when their cage door closes, he's definitely channeling some god of war or something, you know, some ancestral history there, you know.
Man, but I was saying to him that his power is something different, man. You don't see that every day. You notice that distribution of power when his hand connects, it's a different beast. It's different than nearly everyone else you see. He cracks, you just see it when he hits their head, that there's a real weird distribution of power from him, man. I don't quite understand it, but you can really visually see it, eh?
He was always a natural. I started training him when he was 10. He came to train me in our kids class. And within 2 weeks, he's in the jiu-jitsu comp. He's just cleaning everyone up. I said to his mum, I remember saying to her, what's he done before? She's like, tennis. What martial arts? She's like, no, this is the first martial art. I'm like, this kid's got it. This kid's got it expected. I could see it like back then. He was incredible at 10 years old, you know. And then he went away, and then he came back to Strikeforce when he was a little bit older. And I was like, oh, he's this kid. He's come back, you know. And he hasn't disappointed. He's incredible.
In that original fight that I was there for, he was looking good too, even only on 2 weeks' notice. He just gassed a little bit at the end, right? And it gave the other guy the opportunity to get him.
Yeah.
Mad base. So what about Dan, man? Early days of Dan, like that, when you were involved with him, what did you see in him?
Oh, that guy, he's his IQ, his fight IQ was really high from really early on. Like when I left coaching in Auckland, Strikeforce, a guy named Kawada took over, and then Rod McSwain, and then Dan finally took over as coach up there. He was only young, but I would go up there and work on something on a Saturday, and then watch his class Sunday, and he'd be doing what I taught, but lots of stuff added on it, and I hadn't even thought of. You know, I'm like, where did you come up with this stuff? He just had a natural affinity for the art. Real incredible brain for it, man.
Man, when I was talking to him the other day, I asked him like, who's your hero, someone you look up to, and that, and you know, he could have said fucking Muhammad Ali or whatever, and what did he say? He said Coach Hostile, you know. So yeah, you know, there's obviously a strong connection between you guys. You have a pretty good feeling for him, obviously, and he respects you a lot, man. So that's a good thing, eh?
He's a good boy. Like, you know, the loyalty is just, it's you know, it's unbreakable. He's a good man.
Now, for you, I wonder if you're kind of the same. When I talked to Dan, he said in the early days he just knew that this is what it was. That he was a martial artist, basically. He wasn't going to do anything else. He tried other things. Your normal 9-to-5 job lasted like a day or something. When fuck this, I'd rather be poor, go gym to gym and meet people and just fight and train. Was that like you in the early days too, man?
Yeah, I just want to fight anyone, just anything we could get our hands on, because like there was no pathway for us. So any competition, we'd jump in and have a go.
That's it, man.
Jiu-jitsu was like an all-round art. You know, it wasn't just grappling. It was like it had elements of everything in it. So we'd jump in, just have a try it, stand up, point sparring, whatever, freestyle fighting, anything. Just hungry for it.
And some of those early ones you were describing sounded like kind of like the new combat jiu-jitsu, was it? You were doing some jiu-jitsu where there was some basic strikes allowed or something, yeah?
Oh, the early jiu-jitsu comps, yeah, they were striking and grappling. And they had like a light system, 3 red lights and 3 white lights. And if you lit up, they were for grappling and striking. If you lit up all the white ones, then you couldn't score any more points striking. You'd have to. So it was weird. It was a weird competition. That's a real old style tournament scene. But
Yeah.
it forced you to go into both, use both directions, stand up and ground way back then. So,
That sounds kind of cool, actually. Probably good for like that, just for the early guys. It'd be kind of cool.
yeah.
It reminds me of the kickboxing where you had to do X amount of kicks and X amount, and then you couldn't.
Yeah, they used to have to
get
do
through the
8 kicks
round.
above the waist back in the day, eh?
Yeah,
The old
funny
kickboxing.
stuff. Funny stuff. Now, man, in those early days, you were obviously trying to make a one style sort of thing, like when in the early days of trying to formulate your own MMA sort of style. Did you travel around much in New Zealand, deal with many other different forms of training like boxing, etc.?
Everywhere and anywhere they would allow me. I was lucky. My other coach, Terry Evans, he was very eclectic style jiu-jitsu. He would always say to me, "You're not going to teach your style of my style of jiu-jitsu, Terry Evans style. You're going to teach a Karl Webber style. So I want you to go out." He'd actually get us to go out to other clubs, and that's how we hooked up with Aaron, because I wanted to learn. Because Aaron was a kickboxing champion. He was like about the same age coming up. So definitely anything I could get my hands on, I was to go to every, because we didn't have the internet, so I go to every secondhand bookshop and buy every martial art book on anything, just looking for that answer, looking for the secret, looking for the edge.
Man, you remind me of chatting with Lolo Heimuli a while back. He was just talking about trying to get anything. People are sending him a video from overseas and he's studying it, just trying to be able to help his guys because, there was no way of getting him to compete at that world level without, understanding a little bit more and getting a bit more knowledge. And he was doing the same, yeah?
Yeah. And because we're at the bottom of the world, way down here, and pre-internet, man, we just had to wait and save up for the tapes and just try and, like you say, to just pinch any little bit of information, any scrap, any little detail, even noticed people going for stuff and not getting it, and thinking, what are they going for? Trying to work out shit like that. So it was, we were hungry for information.
I remember those. It was like you're just finding your way, right? Because the information that's coming is so confusing. What really works and what doesn't. Like I remember looking at the ninjutsu stuff and just thinking, man, that must be awesome. Ninjutsu. Look at it, and they'd sell all those little things in those magazines. Like you could get those claws to climb trees and all these weird ninja stuff, and that used to look like an amazing sort of art to do. And then you kind of realize in the end that it might not be the best one, right? But it's obviously got a few things they could use. But yeah, kind of difficult to find your path. Yeah.
Our first Valentino show was jiu-jitsu versus ninjutsu. They were the only other guys that we could find that wanted to jump in and have a go. And they're tough, man. They were tough. They knew what was up. They weren't throwing no ninja stars or wearing no claws. They jumped to fight, and there was no holds barred. We had some good scraps with them.
Oh, that's good, man. That's good. Hey, back then, was there any fights between schools and that? No, you hear around the world, some different schools challenging other schools and stuff like that and going into their place. Anything like that over there?
Nah, not really. I heard a few stories of dojo storms, but it never happened to us. We wished it would, but
that's why they didn't come.
Put a sign on welcome.
And what do you feel, man, after all these years? Which sort of styles do you find are the most beneficial? Because there's still a lot of these separate styles going on. What sort of styles would you recommend for people? Obviously, jiu-jitsu is a strong one for you, but what about your normal karate and taekwondo and kung fu and all that? What do you think? Do they have any value?
I think they all have value. There's something every one of them has something. You just got to find the right thing. I'm loving boxing at the moment. Just basic boxing footwork and just basic. I'm just loving that. It's my thing that I'm learning at the moment. That's feeding my brain. So yeah, I think everything's got something to offer, definitely. But boxing and jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai jiu-jitsu.
Is that from you're learning now? Is that from a training perspective, or is it from for teaching people, or is it for yourself?
And now for teaching, because I'm past the use by date. But my brain's always ticking over. I can't relax. You know, I'm here all day and then I go home and watch jiu-jitsu or boxing or something, and the missus is like, take some time off. I'm like, this is how I take my time off, you know. So it's like I'm just feeding that fire. I'm still feeding that fire.
Yeah. And with that, man, do you, like, obviously it's been a long time since you were competing in that. Do you have many ongoing injuries in that from the early days and all the grappling training?
Yeah, I start off Monday, I'm all good. Tuesday, I'm a little bit sore. Wednesday, you know, I'm just calling out numbers from the side, and then Thursday, man, I'm broken every week. Thursday, Friday, and I need some time off. The body's just smashed, really.
What are the main things that you're handling or you're dealing with?
Back, mainly back, and I've had one knee done. One knee's still pretty gone, you know. Just the joints and stuff, just getting up and down, and the impact. Just there's no recovery. These buggers recover. They're like ready to go the next day. This guy had 5 fights in 6 days, didn't even have a mark on him. Whereas I could go down and come and teach a couple of classes, and then, man, I'm broken.
I guess I got that to look forward to, though.
Yeah. On that, is that inevitable, Karl, that you know, if you're going to be involved in combat sports for a long time at a professional level, are you going to 100% be battered and bruised and bad back and joints and that? Is there any way around it? Is there a smarter way, or is that just inevitable?
I think you'd have to be like untouchable to come through without any long-lasting pain, you know. Basically, it's not what doesn't hurt, you know, it's everything hurts. It's good though, over the years I've worked out I've learned how to deal with all the different injuries, because I've had just about all of them. So when someone here gets hurt, pretty much know how to deal with it.
Yeah, man. And obviously now being battered and bruised and that, can you look back on everything and be pretty happy with what you've done in the sport and what you're doing now as a coach and a mentor?
Yep, 100%. 100%. It's been my life dedication, and look where we are. Like, we started in the power station, and 2 Ks down the road is where the Spark Arena is. So we fight the power station, and then Dan Hooker's fighting in the UFC in Spark Arena. And we got Ferg here at the world champs, bringing home world titles. I'm like, how could I not be happy? I mean, I'm living the dream. I'm not getting rich, but I'm rich in life, you know. I'm living the dream, bro.
Yeah, man, you can't take money and possessions with you when you die, but you can, you know, these experiences and that will somehow live on, you know. Yeah,
and hopefully, you know, they say a fighter's name will live on for 10 years and a scholar's will live on for 20. So hopefully it can live for another 10 years after I pass away.
It'll be more than that, bro, more than that from what you're passing on, eh? Hey, on that, I just want to know, do you consider yourself firstly like a martial artist, you know, that old school sort of martial arts style, or just a combat sort of athlete and coach?
Yeah, I used to consider myself a martial artist, but now I'm a combat sports coach. I like coaching security teams and that as well. I do like unarmed combat and that. I really like that stuff. It really gets my gears going as well. But yeah,
actually, on that, man, like the security, right? Like that's when I started doing martial arts back a long time ago. The first job I wanted to do was security, because it's like, man, this is relevant, right? Like I can try the same thing as you, testing and trying techniques to get better in fighting. It's the same thing. You can try these techniques that you're learning. Do they work in reality, right? And when you're kind of semi allowed to do some of the techniques, right?
Oh, 100%. I used to practice every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night for like 10 years, testing stuff out left, right, and center. Throw away what doesn't work, keep what works. And now when I coach security teams, I'm confident in what I teach. I know it works. I've never had an assault charge, so I know that it works within the law. It's effective, and I've never been like put out of work or knocked out or hurt on the job. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it definitely flows on. There's a lot of guys around that are still doing martial arts or MMA fighters and also doing security. Yeah,
all these guys do security.
Yeah. Fortunately, I haven't had much practice, but
it's all right. You got plenty of time, bro. I think things would be a bit calmer now, though, wouldn't they, Karl? Like as far as security goes, I imagine back in the day it was a bit of a tougher job.
Yeah, and back in the day it was mainly like fighters, you know, different gyms. When we bounced in Auckland, all the different bars had different fighters from different gyms. no one had certificates of approval. There was no, anyone could be a bouncer.
There's no
Nowadays-
licensing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, nowadays it's all licensed. And I think the problem is a lot of the guys that were good at the job couldn't get licenses, so they dropped out of that line of work, and they're not there to pass that knowledge on. Back in the day, you'd grab a young fella and keep him under your wing, teaching him the ropes. But a lot of these guys can't work on the doors, so they can't pass that knowledge on. We've got a lot of guys working doors and haven't got a clue what they're doing, man.
Yeah, man. Anyway, it's changed a lot. Hey, speaking of young fellas, man, we should have a little chat with Fergus. Fresh off his win, IMMAF 2021 gold medalist, world champion, man. Awesome job. Great to see Karl's posts and your fights, man. I had a look at him again last night, but I already watched him before. Good work, man. It was great. How did it feel?
Oh, it's been awesome, man. No, it's been a few weeks now, so it's definitely something to like sink in. But it's basically just on to the next one. I've already got another fight lined up. But yeah, even just straight away getting into that quarantine after the fight, that was a good time to just decompress and I suppose let it all sink in. But it was an amazing experience.
Hey, can I ask, how did you two come across each other? How did you find Karl? Because Karl was on your original team, right? I think I read somewhere, I heard somewhere that you started somewhere else, yeah? Yeah,
so originally I started at Academy of Combat. So that would have been like the end of 2015 or something.
You said it was a jiu-jitsu based. It said MMA, but it was jiu-jitsu based, like no-gi jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So it advertised itself as an MMA class, but it ended up being more of just like a no-gi jiu-jitsu class. So that was like the first year or so of my training. I was basically just doing jiu-jitsu. I would occasionally go to a kickboxing class, but I'd sort of procrastinate that side of MMA. So, I mean, I guess that shines through with my current skill set. My grappling's somewhat a little bit stronger than my striking. And that might be why. But yeah, I started Academy of Combat, and that was good for building a base on my skills, I suppose. But no, that's when I met my mate Corey, and he was always doing more research about what's available in Christchurch, and that's when he came across CFC, and he's seen that they had all the top fighters, but it wasn't so much marketed like Academy of Combat was. So we actually went over and did a trial class here. And then I think he signed up straight away, and I came like a month or so later. Yeah, and that would have been 2017 or something.
And what did you think when you first did some sessions with Coach Hostile over here, man? What did you feel?
I loved it. I was probably a bit nervous, but it was just cool being exposed to that full MMA style in a class. It's up to that point I'd only done jiu-jitsu, but no, it was just an awesome opportunity to build off that base and start putting it all together.
And you just said did you say you've already had a fight, or you got one lined up now?
I've got one lined up.
Is that a professional now, or are you going to stick at amateur, or what's the deal?
Nah, so yeah, at one stage we were considering just going pro straight off the back of that, but I think just the amount of experience I was able to gain in such a short period of time, and the IMMAF, I think, that's probably convinced us that it's worth pursuing that road for a little bit longer, just to gain more experience going into the professional ranks.
Yeah, he'd be lucky to get 2 pro fights in a year, but with the way the tournaments go, he could probably get five fights a tournament, maybe 10 fights a year. So definitely worthwhile staying amateur for now.
Get that grounding right before you move into the big league, give you a better founding to then take it straight to that high level, right?
Yeah, and that was Dan's advice straight away. Don't rush, just take your time and build on that.
And watching that, especially that last fight, man, I was thinking you look like you have some answers for these Dagestani style wrestlers, bro. Maybe you might well be the future of MMA. Come in there and be one of the only guys to take these guys out,
Yeah, I was a bit nervous going into it. Like, let's see what all the hype's about. Because I mean, they were basically just cleaning up the whole tournament, dominating everyone. So, but I sort of knew in the back of my head, like, I've got a good natural scramble game, and that's something I obviously work on a lot at the gym. So I had that confidence, but I was also a bit nervous and eager to see how that would stand up to someone that's probably been wrestling their whole lives. And it stood up well, but obviously there's still a lot of room for improvement in terms of not just stopping the takedown, but also getting off the cage or taking him down. and controlling the grappling.
Yeah, I think that was what that seemed to take him a bit when you actually reversed the tables and took him down a couple of times. I think that it seemed to shock him, right? Like they used to be the hammer, not the nail. So when you did it to him, I think it was a bit of a shock to his system, right?
Yeah, I think that was a good statement early in the fight, just to show him that it's not a one-sided grappling affair, I guess. It does wear on you, that grappling style. The further the fight goes, they're good at draining you. And it was easier earlier to, do those explosive takedowns. But obviously, that efficiency that they've got from wrestling for such a long time.
To be honest, I think you took his wind out in that fight. I think you were the one that was going harder than him. When you got to the second and third, he was looking a bit worse for wear than you, I think.
I think we were both tired, but quite possibly.
Hey, we had talking about these guys over here. We had a tournament. There was just a random tournament. I didn't know anything about it, but it was at one of the properties that I work at. So a big event center. It had like 3 or 4 rings set up, and these guys started had an amateur world competition too. But it was arranged by the Russians. I'm not sure if you guys know anything about who runs these things or any of the major ones, but so they'd organize this big tournament with people from around the world. There's people from Australia, India, Russia, a few different places, Germany, etc. But it was organized by these guys. So they brought like this world-class team. It was like UFC level guys fighting in an amateur world tournament. And so that Umar Nurmagomedov that's in the UFC now, he was one of the fighters. There was heaps of guys that was such high level. And so there's a few Aussies there. I'm like, well, Aussies, hey, how are you guys? How many fights have you had? And the guy goes, none. I went, what? None? He's gone, yeah, haven't had any fights. It's our first time fighting. And then I said, oh, what about stand up or BJJ? No, nothing. That just our first one. So you got like 3 or 4 guys from Australia, a few other guys from other countries that were similar, that were just like fucking lambs to the slaughter. You can't believe it. It was like, I knew straight away these guys are fucked, because you could see how good these guys were. They'd get finished within like 30 seconds and stuff. They just bought the wrong representatives, man, completely. And that might have been set up by the Russians to make sure they take it. And they took every fucking division. There was a couple of guys there that were okay, that did well, like 1 or 2 Eastern Bloc guys. And then the Chinese were actually not doing bad in the stand-up, and but their ground fighting wasn't developed enough to do well. But yeah, it was a pretty crazy tournament.
Well, that was kind of the case at the IMMAF. I think Russia and Bahrain, which is a lot of those guys are Russian, basically. They won virtually every division. Yeah, except for middleweight. But so I mean, definitely that wrestling style works in the amateur system.
That's it. The highlight of that one though was you'll appreciate Carl, Mr. Fedor Emelianenko was there, bro. And being the professional kind of security guy I am, I didn't want to go. I don't know. I never go and get photos with people, right? But how can you miss that chance, right? I had to get a picture with Fedor. No chance that I couldn't do that. Anyway, good nice picture for the bank.
He's the man.
That's it, man. And on the hero side of things, this pops into my head. I'm just hazarding a guess that you really like Vanderlei and really like Ensign Inoue as well, right? Because you got 2 children that are named Vanderlei and Inoue, Ensign, right?
That's right.
It's funny, man.
I like the mid, like the old school hearty fighters. They didn't win everything, but they came to fight every single time.
Exactly, man. The Valetudo, man. I used to watch Vanderlei, the headbutts and elbows and that back then. That was like something to see back then, right? Like that was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hardcore back in the day. And I must say, I'm kind of along the same lines in a way. My son is actually called Kai. Strangely enough, I didn't name him after Kai, but it had an influence on it because my wife's from China. So I was looking for a name that is Chinese and English at the same time. And Kai was on this list. And I went, yeah, Kai's a cool guy. He's a good fighter. I'm going to name my son Kai. So it's kind of relevant, pretty funny. Always. Yeah, I got him to send my son a message the other day, and he was stoked. So that's cool. He always looks and that's Kai, He's stoked.
His namesake.
That's it, man. Hey, so back to the event, man. Obviously your style is quite heavily grappling based, but your stand up was looking good too, man. Again, the similarities of you and Karl, but also you and Dan Hooker as well. There's some similarities there. Do you have any people you kind of look up to in terms of style?
My fighting style, definitely training with Dan, like just how good he is with understanding the range of the fight, just something I'm trying to learn and bring into my game. That's a huge part. Yeah, so in terms of the stand-up, that would be a big one. And then I guess I just take bits and pieces from everyone, like obviously a lot of those Russian guys, the wrestling style.
You got Sam Belkin too.
Yeah. In terms of guys that we train with, we got Commonwealth bronze medalist Sam Belkin. So I train a lot with him. Commonwealth wrestling bronze medalist. So leading up to that IMMAF, even just working a few weeks, sort of one-on-one or in a small group with him, like that really leveled up my wrestling massively. And that made a huge difference. And it's exciting to see how much further I can go. And maybe at the next IMMAF, I'll be even more prepared when I face another Russian.
That's awesome, man. When is that? Did they schedule it?
Yeah, I think it's in October. But I've got plenty of other things to get out of the way before then. But I suppose it's always just about building the skills each day, and then when that time comes, I'll be ready for it.
Yeah, man. And do you have a path in mind that you'd like to follow? You guys just talked about continuing on with the amateurs for a year or two, and then obviously hitting the pro. What's the goal? What's the path that you want to follow?
We want the belt, UFC belt. The goal is not to get in the UFC. The goal is to be the champ.
That's good, man. That's what you want. You want that stretch goal, right? You got to hit it.
Yeah.
So, so the aim is continue with IMMAF and then kick on to the pros in probably 2024. Is that the goal, or you're not sure?
Yeah, hopefully if COVID blows over and we can get around. Like Australia was our main, our main playground. We were getting flown over there all the time, and then up to Hong Kong and Macau. Here we might get 2 or 3 shows a year. So once the borders open up, hopefully, there'll be better opportunity to turn pro.
Fergus, you fought on Eternal before. Was that in New Zealand or was it in Australia?
That was in New Zealand. I think that was the first show in New Zealand. I don't think there's been one since. So, yeah.
Cool. What sort of promotions would you eye as the early professional sort of side of things, Karl and Fergus?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully the IMMAF experience and winning that, hopefully being a 2-time IMMAF world champion, that would set me up for big things early on in professional. But I don't know. What do you think?
XFC titles seem to carry some weight. A lot of XFC champions go on to the UFC, so we'll be chasing that for sure. Yeah,
man. I think you mentioned before, Karl, in a message that that Fergus seems like a pretty clued up guy. He seems pretty intelligent, right? You've done a lot of study and stuff too, right? Economics, wasn't it?
Yeah, just got my degree actually when I came back from Abu Dhabi, so it all came at once. It was quite cool receiving that as well. Yeah,
that's cool, man. It's good to have that balance anyway, man, between the training and keep that education up just as a backup, right?
Yes, and in the old days, we were guilty of causing a lot of brain damage with our fighters. So over the last actually just before Ferg joined, I was trying to gear back on all that head trauma. So lucky, because can't damage this brain.
He's got a few cells to spare by the look of things, anyway, bro. Hey, that's the thing, Karl. Back in the old days, people knew a little bit, but not much, right? Like we talked about, people being punch drunk and that, but that was about the extent of it, right? No one told you that you go to the gym and punch on and you're causing these ongoing problems that might affect you later in life. You just go and punch on, and it was a lot of in where I was, a lot of one-upmanship. So you'd attack them, they'd attack you, and it just builds up to this crescendo, and you're doing that every day, sometimes every week at least. And
full contact sparring 4 times a week. It's too much. We didn't know. I was brought up on a traditional martial arts style, like stuff that you see in kung fu movies. So it's not until you start to see it happening over and over again, guys are getting head trauma and they can't fight anymore, they can't compete anymore, and you start to realize it's my fault. I'm the one that's encouraging them to train the way we used to train. So I definitely had to have a look at things and change things a little bit.
And how do you guys kind of avoid that heavy head contact now? Do you just focus on you know, just easing up on the head, or more technique style sparring, or what do you do?
Yeah, we technical style sparring and just heavy contact once a week. You know?
Yeah, and the good thing is with Fergus style too, you're avoiding a bit of the head contact because you're doing a lot of grappling, getting in tie, right? So
yeah, even in sparring, I try and fight a sort of range style rather than getting in the pocket and brawling. And I suppose on the point of hard sparring, it's hard to learn when you're going 100%. You're not experimenting. You're just doing what you're already good at, not practicing things that you're working on, you know, in classes. Yeah,
that's it. And so that's probably, we've just hit off most of the questions I had on my list here. I appreciate, Karl. It's been a long time catching you. It was actually 1 year and 2 weeks. I just checked out that you said you'd come and have a chat with me. So it's good that we finally got you on here, bro. Appreciate it, because I know you don't really like to be on these things talking and that. And Fergus too, nice to meet you, man. And obviously big, bright career ahead of you. If possible, I'd like to keep in touch, man. If you'd actually accept my Facebook request, I can.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure thing.
And yeah, we'll keep in touch, man. And it'd be good, like Karl said, you're an intelligent young man. I'd be good to catch up and have a chat here and there, man. Just follow your career and that. So yeah.
Thanks so much, bro.
Cool. Yes, thanks, Toby.
All right, guys. Thanks so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, good to talk to you, bro.
Have a good one.